Hello, class. It's Miss Roberts here, and tonight we're going to talk about intercultural communication and how culture plays into our communication patterns and identity. Let's begin. So let me go ahead and lost my cursor here, so I'm going to do my touch screen here. There you go. All right. So let's talk about culture. All right. So I'm going to be moving myself around here today, wherever I find open space. All right, so let's talk about culture. Many of us have heard about culture and have an understanding about our culture, our identities, and backgrounds. Let's go ahead and define it and expand the definition. So, culture is language, the language, values, beliefs, and customs that people share and learn. I'm about to say customers. So, the language, values, beliefs, and customs that people share and learn. So I really like this definition because it really broadens it. So of course we have our national ethnic heritage. We have generations can be a cultural experience. Being in Southern California can be a cultural experience. Certain hobbies have such a widespread appeal that it becomes a cultural experience, such as being a gamer or sports. So for culture, it can be our traditional labels and expanded to more broad things. But you also have co-culture. It is a membership of a group that's a part of an encompassing culture. So for example, I am African American and I'm American. So I belong to a co-culture, African American, within a larger culture of being American. Then we have communication. So interactions between the groups of co-cultures. So if you can think about another co-culture, generations, excuse me, you have, let's see, boomers. There's a silent generation before the boomers. I had to think about it real quick. So the silent generation before the boomers. Oh, you know what? I apologize. There is the greatest generation before the silent generation. And then there is the boomers, Gen X, then millennials. That's me, I'm an older millennial. Then there is Generation Z. So Generation Y is millennials, Generation Z is possibly you guys, but then we have multiple generations taking the class as well. So awesome. And then we have Gen Alpha, and then the generation after that, whatever they're going to call that. But if you think about that as integrated communication, we communicate within our own generations all the time. We have our own slang, our own shared experiences, and that's what defines a generation. Birth year and experiences within those birth years. All right, let me move myself over here a little bit. Oop. Okay, there you go. All right. So this is the word all. So if you can't see it, it's word all right there. All right. So with intercultural communication, since we belong to different cultures, is all communication intercultural? Well, not exactly. There are two criteria for intercultural communication. First is, excuse me, other people interacting from different cultures and are the messages themselves about an intercultural experience. So it's not enough just for the two or more people rather, to be from different cultures. The conversation or the messages that they're interacting with may have to do with culture. So with intercultural communication, it's on a spectrum. So least cultural is if cultural differences mean a little bit, and most intercultural. So there's differences in backgrounds, beliefs, and it's noteworthy in the communication and messages. And is culture salient? Does it matter within the context of the person or the conversation? All right. So now we have cultural dimensions. So when we think about intercultural communication as a study, and if you decide to take this class, it's a really interesting class. It's a class that I took 3 times. I know what you're thinking. Did she fail this class 3 times? No, I did not. I swear to you. I got really good grades in all 3 classes. So I got A's in all 3 classes. The 3 times took the class. So I took the class at community college, so that's where we're taking it now. Then because it was level 100, and I had to take intercultural communication as level 300. The previous one didn't count. I couldn't replace it, so I had to take it again at a level 300. So I believe I took it freshman year or sophomore year. Then I took it again junior year. And then I go to graduate school and I'm like, okay, yes, I got two intercultural communications classes in the bag. And yeah, I had to take it at the graduate level because the previous two does not count for the graduate level. So I took it at the community college level, the bachelor's level, and at the graduate level. But it was all fun. It was all good. So I always like talking about how I took this 3 times. Like, did you fail this class? Like, no, they made me do this 3 times. But it was a little bit different each time. So with cultural dimensions, these are the ways that cultures differ. So they label different aspects of different cultures. And here are some of those labels. One of them being individualistic versus collectivistic. So when you think about US culture in general, we're very independent. We like freedom. We express ourselves of only ourselves. And our primary responsibility is to ourselves. We leave our parents' home and establish and buy our own homes if we can. This economy. But anyway, the idea is we go out and buy our own homes and create our own families. And yeah, that is a indication of an individualistic culture. Our primary concern is to oneself. That doesn't mean we're inherently selfish people, but we operate in a world where we are representing ourselves and staking our own claim in it. Versus collectivistic cultures, the loyalties and obligations are to our in group. That may include our family, communities, our workplaces. So we're not just representing ourselves, we're representing our families. So I'm not just Sabrina, I'm Deborah and Wilbert's daughter. I'm Aaron's sister. I'm not just representing myself, but I'm an employee of this corporation, of this company, or this corporation, or I am representing my community in Upland, things or Pomona or what have you, right? So when we think about individualistic and collectivistic cultures, they all falls on the spectrum as well. But usually individualistic cultures are in the West, US, Germany, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada. But collectivistic cultures are usually centered in Asian countries, African countries, and Latin American countries. All right, cultural dimensions. So we have low and high context culture. Language with cultural dimensions, the language expresses thoughts, feelings, and ideas as directly as possible. So think about the way we write essays. We have our introduction. Within the introduction, we have the thesis statement, which tells us what the body sections are going to be about. We recap in the conclusion, and we end with a final note, right? So there's clarification, more clarification. Our topic sentences tells us what the body paragraphs was about, but we already talked about what it was going to be about in the thesis statement. So our writing and our way of speaking directly and clearly and succinctly are an indicator of a low context culture, which America definitely is. But high context cultures rely on subtle nonverbal cues, in essence, to maintain social harmony. So being direct might not be viewed as favorably. It might be viewed as being rude or maybe not understanding the nuance of a situation or hierarchy. In the high context culture, maintaining that social harmony is paramount. So direct thoughts and direct feelings being expressed that way might not be the best way to do that. All right. Let me move myself here. All right. So you also have uncertainty avoidance. So it's a degree in which members of a culture feel threatened by ambiguous situations and how much they try to avoid them. So in these cultures with high uncertainty avoidance was always a term. 3 times I took this class. It always tricked me up because it's high uncertainty avoidance It almost sounds like a double negative, but it's not. So with high uncertainty and avoidance, they need clear rules and regulations. They ambiguous situations culturally is not a good thing. And low uncertainty avoidance are less threatened by new and unexpected things, and that is a cultural dimension. All right, then we also have power distance. So it's the degree in which members of a society can accept an unequal distribution of power. In the US, that has changed. So with low power distance, they minimize distinctions between class and status, and high power distance is a tendency to obey authority and maintain rigid hierarchy. So the US used to be more higher power distance, especially back in the day. But now, as has gone on, we've turned into a more lower power distance society. But it also depends on the context. Excuse me. Say if you're in the military, then yes, they're a very high power distance type of field because you have to be hierarchy is very important. But say if one is a tour guide for a national park, might not have as much power distance. Just saying. Then we have different cultural characteristics, which can include, but are not limited to, these characteristics. So, for example, we have race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, physical ability or disability status, age or generation, and socioeconomic status. So, these are some of the things that encompass who we are and what we think about when we think about culture. I also want to talk about, let me move myself. My apologies. Okay. So let's talk about race versus ethnicity. Race is a category to explain the differences between peoples whose ancestors originated from different regions of the world, but has little to do with explaining individual differences. So ethnicity is more commonly used instead of race because we can think about their national culture and other unifying perspectives such as language, region, and what have you. So I'll give you an example. When I originally from Detroit, Michigan, and I moved to Orlando, Florida when I was a teenager. And one of the things I usually tell everybody on the first day is that my first job was at Disney World. Well, I grew up in Detroit. I grew up in a working class, middle class African American community. So everybody looked like me, and many of us had similar experiences. However, when I moved to Florida, let me go ahead and move myself down a little bit. There I go. So I moved to Florida. Not only did I meet people from all different parts of the world, but I met people of African descent from other places. So I knew these places existed. I just never really met anyone from those places before. So it was so cool. I had friends who were from Africa. I had friends who were from Haiti. I still have a close friend that I talk to who was from Haiti. So when we think about describing us, we will both identify as black women, so we will racially describe ourselves identically, but I'm African American and she will identify as Haitian Americans, though we're the same race but different ethnicities. All right. So, our final leg of our discussion tonight, we will think about okay, now that we have an awareness of culture and identity, and we're understanding what our identities are, and there's multiple ways that cultures are identified. What do we do with this information? Well, we can develop intercultural competence. So maybe some of us might want to travel to different countries, maybe in places where they speak another language. Maybe we want to learn another language. That is awesome. So before we take a deeper dive into doing study abroad or visiting other countries, if we haven't done so already, let's think about how to gain intercultural communication competence. while we're there. So you want to have the motivation and attitude to get along with everybody. So sometimes you don't want to be the stereotype of the rowdy tourist, especially like as Americans. We want to make sure that we're respectful and that we're motivated to learn about the culture, absorb what's going on over there, and then just fully embrace the experience and having the desire to learn about other cultures. But we just talked about uncertainty avoidance, but we can't avoid uncertainty in this context. So that's the irony part. So we want to have a tolerance for ambiguity because sometimes if we don't know and if we hadn't read about certain customs, we might make a mistake and living with that uncertainty, but that's okay. Usually people are understanding. You might be like, oh, I'm from America, I'm from this different place. I didn't mean any harm. And they provide teachable moments as long as you're teachable in that moment. But just being open minded to differences can help you become a better intercultural communicator. But beware of these roadblocks to intercultural communication competence. So you don't want to be ethnocentric and have an attitude that, oh, my own culture is superior, especially when it's someone else's country. It's almost like being in their house, right? Their house, their rules, and respect that. And we also don't want to have prejudice, bias, or stereotyping. So prejudice is an unfair bias and intolerant attitude for towards someone that belongs to an outgroup. So remember we talked about in groups, and those are the groups that we belong to, and out groups are people who don't belong to our group. But even though they don't belong to our group, we still want to embrace differences of other people because we will want people to embrace our differences. And then we don't want to stereotype, have exaggerated beliefs and generalizations about a group. That is a no-no when we want to talk about intercultural communication competence. So, how do we develop intercultural communication competence? We know what it is. Here are some more tips for your next study abroad trip. So, first, having the knowledge and skill. We live in the age of information. We can have so much information from our fingertips. Use it. There are people who have traveled places that talk about their experiences. You can connect and to someone from that place. I know back in the day, we were talking back in the day before videos were a thing online. I used to belong to a message board. Yeah, it was like it was like a forum that connected pen pals. I wanted to visit Japan when I was younger, so hopefully I'll be able to go one day. But I had a Japanese pen pal, and it was such a cool experience. I was able to learn about Japanese pop, and I was able to learn about different bands I listened to. And I wouldn't because the internet back then wasn't what it was. Because we're talking about 27. This is talking about the early 2000s. There wouldn't have been a good way for me to be exposed to that music unless my pen pal told me. Versus nowadays, we have all different types of groups from all different countries, and we're able to be exposed to them. We have Spotify. Wouldn't have been, didn't exist back then. So I was really grateful for that experience. And you can have a similar experience with all the things that we have now. So we can be mindful, be aware of our behaviors and others, observe and apply others' behaviors to one's own, or take active strategies, read, get that Duolingo up and go ahead and learn that language, take videos, take classes about the culture. All right, so when we think about developing intercultural competence, we want to use appropriate self disclosure. So just being mindful of your surroundings, having patience and perseverance, and through trial and error, and if you stay long enough, you'll transition from culture shock to adaptation. All right, so thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight or today if you're watching this in the daytime. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon. All right, have a good night. Bye.